Weird banger coming up this weekend at flyweight. It's like me on a Friday night trying to broach my wife, and we're in the car. We're going to Costco, and I said, hey, do you think a weird banger would be if somebody walked out in the UFC to Every Light in the House is On by Trace Adkins, and she just kind of went brain neutral and couldn't really function after that. We had an odd time out when we went to town. Matt, weird banger? When it does come down to this one, you look at the matchup, and you have Nate Mayhem Maness taking on Matheus Mendonca. It's a story of a big gym versus a small gym. It's a story of former bantamweights down at flyweight. That's an oddball type of fight. And when you look at it for Matheus Mendonca, he's young, he's a smaller fighter, he's only 24, and this actually is his flyweight debut. And if you look at it for Nate Maness, a little bit up there in age, still in his physical prime, nonetheless at 32, but this is going to be his second try at 125 career-wise. His last time out, made the move down. He didn't really have great success when he was taking on Tagir Ulanbekov. It was the high single, and Ulanbekov raised the knee up. Didn't go high crotch, raised the knee up, dumped Maness, and when Maness went to get back up, that's when he got himself caught in that tricky choke from Ulanbekov. First round loss there. So when you look at it for this fight, Matt, Nate Maness, youth pastor out of Kentucky, Matheus Mendonca, blue hair, don't care, out of Brazil. I'm interested to get your thoughts on this one because for Mendonca, everything's unorthodox. If you look up at the top of this card in the main event, you got a guy in Bobby Green that holds his hands really low. We know the odd angle punches. Exactly. We know the takedown defense. That's the Bobby Green standard. A lot of shoulder roll. He can get out of the way from the majority of those punches, even though, and I'm going to break it down a little bit, Tony Ferguson landed at the start of the first round. Drew Dober, remember, behind the block line in both circumstances, was able to land against Bobby Green as well. Mendonca's in that same breath, although he will strike a little bit longer. He throws the kicks to all three levels. He likes to go deep to the body. He likes to go front kick to the head. But Mendonca throws a little bit of a wrinkle out there. And we know Bobby Green will occasionally go for some takedowns. He will. Mendonca will go for very powerful takedowns, and he's been able to do that against a high level of opponent on the regional scene. We talk about the win over Pedro Nobre that then got Mendonca on a contender series and then into the UFC. We also talk about his win over a Titan bantamweight champ over with Future FC. But for Mendonca, although he's been able to dust the majority of his opponents and he's been able to get 7 of them out of there in the first round, when, and it's been a limited sample size, but when we've seen fights go long, we touched on this before he fought Javid Basharat, the wheels completely fall off of his game plan.
We gotta give him Shane Carwin's number.
No, I'm not even going with Shane Carwin. We're gonna make this one new.
But Shane Carwin can tell the horror stories.
Hold on. I'm gonna make this a new thing for this week because we have 2 fighters on this card that do it. Matheus Mendonca fights in that Christos Giagos zone.
He really
First
does.
round, every other round, completely different fighter.
Which is great for him because that first round is so electric, but that's why it's so difficult to predict a lot of his fights because he just isn't the same version of himself once he is gassed after he has expended a lot of his energy. And you mentioned it, even if he does decide to grapple, remember Conor McGregor brought this up? I turn wrestlers into panic wrestlers. I hit them on the feet, make them take terrible takedown attempts, and then knock them out after. Mendonca doesn't shoot like crappy takedowns even when he's tired. He's gonna go for it, and he's gonna go for it with a lot of power behind it, so he's just gonna make himself even more tired the more that this fight goes on, and that is the most difficult thing to predict when you are predicting a Mendonca fight. It's, can he find that Goldilocks zone? Because he does remind me a lot of a younger Paulo Costa. Remember before he fought Johnny Hendricks? There were all those question marks about, hey, does he have the gas tank? Is he just some big muscled up dude who can knock people out? And luckily, as his career has progressed, we've learned a lot more about him. And yes, he does have a lot of the other skills. But for Mendonca, it's just the ceiling could be so high, but the floor is so low once we do see all of those cracks in the armor. And that's what is going to be frustrating in this matchup. Now, Nate Maness does one thing in this fight that I don't like at all, and it's he does have a tendency to tense up when he's on the retreat, and if Mendonca does throw a lot of blitzes at him with some of those power-heavy shots, then he could easily get through some of the guard of a guy like Nate Maness, crack him with a big shot to the body or to the head. I just don't know if Mendonca's going to be able to sustain it long enough. This could be like the Murzakanov versus Gerald Meerschaert fight, remember? Gerald Meerschaert took as much damage as he thought he possibly could, and then all of a sudden the fight is completely turned around.
Mahmoud Muradov, who you're referencing
Sorry,
there.
Yes, thank you.
When you do look at this fight, though, Matt, I mean, for Matheus Mendonca, it's really rare that you have a lot of flyweights out of the same gym, but he trains with Alan Nascimento, trains with Daniel Lacerda. Sure. He got a fight rebooked for next week, taking on Edgar Chairez again. Chris Tione, thought he made the right call on that one. I personally did. And from that opposite angle that came out way after the fact, looks like it's all right, too. For Mendonca, though, there's 2 more that are out there. Cledison Rodriguez, Is he a bantamweight, though? I don't know, but I'll just kind of lump him in there a little bit. But the guy that you see a little bit of in their respective games is Felipe de Santos, who came in to take on Manel Kape on really short notice. Both guys will wrestle. Both guys throw those kicks to all three levels, the teep to the body, the kick to the head. Again, for Mendonca, a very, very good level of competition. And his foray into MMA was a guy was beating up on his brother, so he brought a scalpel into a gym. Make sure you check out that story from MMA Fighting. A weird life story from Matheus Mendonca, usually good for about one of those strange stories of MMA lore out of Brazil once a year. When we flip it on over to Nate Maness, and again, you can't forget, Mendonca, first fight at flyweight, career-wise. I don't care if you're 24, I don't care if you're 55. It's a weird career move, and I don't necessarily like it when it's in those really lower weight classes. For Maness, though, he did an interview with James Lynch, the MMA sucker this time, and he said, and I quote, "I felt amazing about the weight cut the last time. I've had way worse cuts at 135. I think the older I get, the more disciplined I get. It makes these cuts a lot easier." And he also said that he's got 2 fights left on his UFC deal. He really wants to impress for this training camp at a Tag MMA, as well as Nice Guy submission fighting. They brought in a D1 Cleveland State 185er wrestler to train with, and he expects a lot of wrestling out of Mendonca in the matchup. And Nate Maness was one of those OG fighters that Dana White wasn't able to pick up on, because he would have used this famous saying if he did, but if you don't know now, you know. Maness was an original guy, being 4-0 as an amateur, 11-1 coming into the UFC. The lone loss was a TKO bantamweight title defense against one of Matt's favorite tricky sidewinding southpaws, Taylor Lapilus. He lost that belt. He was able to go out there, get a win, and now he gets to Spider-Man meme it up. And there's a lot of those on this card. But Spider-Man meme it up with Johnny Munoz Jr. And that was a really weird fight. Point deductions were what they were. The fight was in tight. It was an odd one. Could have gone either way, but Maness gets the win. And then he continued to win. And you look at those wins where he was able to get bonuses. He was able to get a little bit more notoriety. The Luke Sanders fight. What do we remember out of that one, Matt?
Luke Sanders is the Dante Exum at the UFC.
No. We're trying to bring a new saying in this week. Luke Sanders is the Christos Yagos zone.
I mean,
a hard first round, which Sanders won, but then in the second round, Sanders just flew right off a cliff, and then Maness was able to take
Sanders
over.
had a lot of deficiencies to his game.
Nate Maness then against Tony Gravely loses the first round, comes back out, finishes Tony Gravely. The last 2 losses, finally he doesn't get to take on a Dagestani fighter. He fights Umar Nurmagomedov. You're not going to win that fight. And then he goes out there against Ulanbekov, and it was a tough luck of the draw. So when you look at this fight, Matt, regardless of the weight, I am surprised that Mendonca, for not having a single UFC win, is about a 3-1 favorite in the fight. We'll see if the fans agree. We have a look at the top.
The only thing that I do want to say, though, at 24, I don't worry about the weight cut as much. I will say, like,
the guy,
I understand, but he's
fast and loose, and he holds his hands down, and he's extremely hittable.
He's
and
also 5'6", so if he fought at bantamweight, there's going to be other guys who are way bigger than him. Like, Marlon Vera's 5'10". Like, you just got to think, he's not the biggest guy in the world, and at 24 years old, I don't think moving down to 125 is the career killer that we've made it
Double Johns, like we're walking out of the Rippers, Dawson and Lineker would have the thing to say to you. We have a look at the topology, Matt. Surprise.
Guys who aren't in the UFC anymore.
To us, they are. To you, Piotr Jan. I'm going to say over under 70% Mendonca here.
I think it'll be over.
What world do we live in? 1,003 total votes, 78% Mendonca, 57% by knockout for the 22% that I'm Maness, 72% by decision. I should say this. While Mendonca's never fought at flyweight, and Maness is making another cut to flyweight, and it might seem like a weird flyweight fight where they should be fighting at bantamweight, kind of like how Alexander Hernandez is trying to make featherweight this weekend again. Nate Maness did touch on it in that MMA Sucka interview that this was at flyweight. So make sure you tune in for this fight because both these guys tend to go out on their shield if it does go out early. I'm going to go with Mendonca. I think the odd angle punches. You brought it up and kind of buried the lead. Nate Maness stands extremely tall.
Stiff.
For being the tallest fighter in the flyweight division. He stands really tall. He is good at checking leg kicks, which is nice to see in a matchup like this. And he is a very good counter striker. That's my biggest point for Nate Maness. So I could definitely see an underdog performance from Maness getting a win here. The veteran savvy, he's fought very big names. Again, when he was the TKO, and even before that, Jesse Arnett, the big cat, that was a win to get the belt over TKO in Quebec. He also had fights against Mark McDonald, Caio Machado, and the like. So again, for me, I do like Mendonca. I think the power can carry him. I like the wrestling. He can mix it up. But this feels like a trap card fight for me.
It does a little bit, but to me it comes down to, is Mendonca going to lose it for himself? Because if he does end up getting tired, Maness takes over, he's probably going to have some level of success before he does tire out, because he does throw the kitchen sink at his opponent. So I think if he is able to land some of those more dynamic shots on the outside, he is the more powerful striker. He should be able to catch the chin of Maness. But this is one of those fights where, again, if you notice him start to slow down even a little bit, that's when Maness could start to take over. But I do have Mendonca for the pick.
Every light in the house is on. The front yard looks like runway lights. Matt, going with that hot and bothered kid out of Brazil. It's Matheus Mendonca to get the win. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have in the matchup. Some big time fights in this card, including the aforementioned Green versus Dawson in the main event. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.